Thanks for chatting with my dad. I actually think that he might get vaccinated now. I'll let you know if that happens, as it will be because of you. He's a heavy smoker in his late 50s, so I've been quite worried about him. Thanks, Destiny. Oh, well, thank you, Cheesy Crust. I appreciate it, my dude.
How are you?
I'm doing great. So one of my listeners told me that he wanted us to chat, I guess, relating to vaccines in the United States or the coronavirus. Yeah.
Right.
Well, do you want to introduce yourself at all, or as much as you're comfortable with? This is a lot of people are listening, so don't be too personal, obviously. But
Right. My name is Mike. I'm from Idaho, and I just want to learn a little more about the vaccine. I really don't trust the government. They've
Gotcha.
lied way too much.
Gotcha. All right. Well, where do you want to start?
Well, I just want to know what you think about mandatory vaccines, or if you think it's a person's choice, or
I think that the mandatory vaccine question is hard from a public policy point of view. I think that there are spaces where mandatory vaccines make sense. So, for instance, in the military, I think that it is obviously a no-brainer. And for public school systems, it's probably obviously a no-brainer. But outside of that, it's probably a bit too much. It's a bit of an overreach, I think, of government policy to like mandate vaccines for the population writ large.
right. Do you think workplaces should be able to make you get a vaccine, or
Yeah, I
is
think
that
I think
an
private
overreach?
companies should. So like like hospitals and stuff would probably mandate it if a workplace wants to. I mean that's their right to do so. I would say, right?
Right. Um, do you think that people could? Do you think we get immune to this, or is that not something we know yet?
Get immune to the coronavirus.
Yeah, build up immunities.
Well, I mean, if you get a vaccine, you'll get some immunity. If you get infected, you'll get some immunity. Yeah, I mean, you do. Obviously, if it changes or if it morphs over time, I mean, then it might become like an endemic thing like the flu, where you just see it every year. But
Right. Um, what about like the flu shot and stuff like that? I've never gotten one, and I think I have a pretty good immunity system because I don't ever get the flu. I mean, so I had a job where our boss said, everybody jump in, we're going to go get a flu shot. And about half of them went. Half of us said, fuck yeah, we're not going. What do you think about that? I mean,
so there is a there's a complicated concept. There's a number that epidemiologists talk about when they talk about viruses, and that number is how many people do they think will get infected if a person
right,
has a disease. So people will refer to this as they'll call it like R naught. But basically it just means like if a person gets infected, how many other people can we expect them to infect with said disease? If you get the flu, the R naught of the flu is anywhere depending on like the strain is like from 0 to 2. So like maybe if you get infected one time, then you're likely to infect one other person. So
right,
like if a couple people have the flu and they go home, it's not really that big a deal. Now the flu still kills anywhere from like 20 to 50,000 people a year in the US, but that's without like any big like masking mandates or social distancing or anything. The R naught of the Delta variant of the coronavirus that we're seeing right now is like, I've heard anywhere from 5 to 10, meaning for every one infected person, you get like 10 more infected people. And I think the scary thing is that I think as people, we're used to things increasing by like a set number. So like if I take like 2 and I add 2 to it 5 times, I get like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That growth isn't very big. But if you do things like 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, if you do that 5 times, you go like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. And then if you keep doing it, like that growth is so huge that if you're infecting 5 to 10 people every time you get sick, you can like out of nowhere get these huge like pandemics, which I think is the worry with the coronavirus, because even with all of the masking and the social distancing, so many more people are getting sick from this than they would like the flu.
Right. Has like the deaths of the flu went down since people have been social distancing and wearing masks and
Yeah, I think like dramatically. I think the number of flu cases in the U.S. are down like 96% or something. It's a really, really, really low number now.
oh wow, that's kind of proof that something must be working, huh?
But I think it also goes to show that like if flu cases have like reduced by like 96 or 99%, even if they've reduced that much, and we still have like, was it 300,000 or 400,000 people that died of the coronavirus in 2020? Like how many more could have died if we did nothing? You know?
Right. What about like Israel? I heard that they have a high percentage of their population that has got vaccinated, and yet they still have a high death rate from the coronavirus. How is that explained?
Um, I don't. I'm looking this up real quick because I don't think they have a high death rate. I think that they have gotten a lot of vaccines and they're still getting a lot of people sick. But so for comparison, Israel right now has had around 7,000 people die of the coronavirus, and that's with a population of 9 million people.
Okay. So just a lot of the population got the coronavirus, but the death rate was less significant.
Yeah, so over 1 million people have been infected, but only 7,000 have died. So that's kind of like one of the nice things too about getting vaccinated. Like a lot of people will say, well, if you get vaccinated, you can still get sick, which is true. But it's kind of like how like an airbag doesn't keep you from having a car accident. But if you do get in a car accident, you're usually a lot better off. So even in Israel, where some of the numbers where they got hit the hardest with the Delta variant, like if you were vaccinated and you got sick, you still are like 90% safer from like being hospitalized or having like serious complications than somebody that didn't get vaccinated.
Right. Well, what do you think about like Governor Brown over in Oregon wanting to mandate wearing masks outside? I don't think there's no, I mean, outside's kind of to me, not significant enough to have to wear a mask. I mean, if you go into a public place where there's lots of people, I can see that, and I abide by that.
I mean, like I think that like outside in super public places, I think it's okay. So like for instance, if you're having like big biker rallies, or if you're having like big concerts or whatever in outdoor areas, it's probably good to wear a mask. But like mandating it generally just to be outside all the time and do it, I think it's probably kind of dumb. Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that if that was like the actual mandate to wear it outside at all points in time.
Yeah, she was even encouraging people to turn in their neighbors if they weren't wearing their masks outside. I just think that's kind of a overreach on her part.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, so, yeah. I mean, there are definitely people that say dumb things sometimes on both sides. But I still think it's like pretty clear that regardless of like who's saying dumb stuff on the right or who's saying dumb stuff on the left, it seems like the benefits of getting vaccinated are still pretty clear. Like even in like the worst infected areas.
Right. What is in the vaccine? Is there anything in there that might have long-term effects later on down the line, or
I mean,
or do they know that?
It's always something that's being studied and looked at, so it's impossible to say. There are two things that we do know. One is that there are definitely long-term negative impacts for a lot of people that get the coronavirus. So that is known for sure. And the second thing is that generally when there are negative effects of a vaccine, they usually show up within like a couple months. So like it's really rare that you'll get like vaccinated and then like 10 years later something is like hiding into your body, just because of like the like what the vaccines are. Like basically you inject it into your body processes it, and then like more or less like all of it is kind of like eaten up by your cells, and then it's processed and you're done with it.
Right.
Or
Have you
at least
heard?
for the mRNA vaccines, the Moderna and the Pfizer one. I can't speak to the others, but
Right. Um, my two bosses, they're a married couple. They got the coronavirus early on when it first started, and
hmm
he's like, I'm gonna say in his early 70s, and he was a helicopter pilot over in Afghanistan, and came back home, got it, and then never could go back to work. But he's still been having like brain fog, and this was over like a year ago.
yeah,
And
some
so
people
have you
are
heard of cases where they still have the long-term effects afterwards?
for
Like
people that have
that.
gotten sick or for people that have gotten vaccinated.
For people that have gotten sick. He's been vaccinated too since, but
Yeah,
he's
so
still having problems.
yeah, so if I'm going to be totally honest, I was one of those early people that thought like I'll just get infected because fuck it, and then I'll have like immunity, and then maybe I'll get vaccinated later. Because I'm relatively young, relatively healthy, and I wasn't too concerned. But I think the thing that kind of
Right,
like pushed me over was hearing about how many like long-term cases there were. So some people are calling it like long COVID, where you
right,
get infected and then you either have like pretty bad respiratory problems for a long time, or you have heart related issues, or even some like neurological issues, like weird like brain clotting stuff that can happen. And that was enough to kind of scare me into like, okay, fuck it, I'm just gonna get vaccinated because, yeah, the long
right.
term effects seemed like really scary. Yeah.
Oh, well. Well, Destiny, I think you cleared up a lot of the questions I had. So,
I think that like in terms of like thinking about because you mentioned like trusting the government in the beginning. Um,
right,
I think it's reasonable, especially with how politicized everything gets, um, like on whether or not we can or cannot trust like the government for certain things. But when I look at like health related stuff, especially from
right,
hospitals, when it comes to the vaccine, like I think this is something that has been like collaborated on across multiple institutions. So like the government and like schools and universities and private companies. And it's been collaborated on across multiple countries across the world. So even if like the government in the United States was lying, there's no way that like every other government would also agree to lie like with everybody else, right? Like I feel like there would have been leaks, or you would have seen like evidence of like, you know, Germany would come out and say like, hold on, the United States isn't being truthful for this, or like France would come out and say. So I feel like everybody in the world, like all the governments and all the schools kind of coming together and be like, okay, yeah, like the vaccine is probably safe. I think that makes me feel like a lot more confident in it than just relying on, you know, like the U.S. government for like a source of
right.
health information. Yeah.
Well, that's true. Uh, what about like a lot of these doctors and at some of these universities that refuse to get vaccinated?
I mean, like you'll find a couple of people that are like that in every field. I mean, there's always going to be like a couple people that are like, I disagree with this for whatever reason. But I mean, like
Right,
at the end of the day, like I can either trust like a few of the really outspoken doctors that disagree with it, or I can look at like the overwhelming amount of public, academic, and private support for it, and then I can look at like, well, how has it turned out? Because another thing to consider too is we've never had a mass vaccination event like this before, right? Where hundreds of billions, and maybe at this point,
right,
of people have gotten vaccinated. If there were bad things happening, like that would be impossible to hide, right? You would see there would be
right,
so many people having issues, and we just don't see it happening. So, yeah, I think like 95% of doctors are vaccinated. I'm sure there are some that aren't, but I mean, like, yeah, there's always going to be outliers.
right. Okay. Well, I appreciate it. I guess that's about all I got.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate the conversation. Yeah, have a good one.
Hey, you too.
All
Thanks a
right.
lot.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
All right. Well, that was a lot less confrontational than I thought.